And we are live, guys. Welcome to today's DCA Live. How are you doing, James?
Good.
Mando?
Doing great. Good to have you back as the host.
Thank you. Marty, what's up?
We're doing good, guys. Nearly the end. Let's go.
Exactly. We have a packed agenda for the day, as always. We will explore, has Bitcoin finally broken the pattern? Was it the first higher low that we have seen? MicroStrategy has bought, or is that the whole reason for the pump? Is it the MicroStrategy pump, or what does it mean? Other assets, other charts are doing massive changes. Gold went into continuation. Yields had a massive breakdown. We will explore that. The election also swinging back and forth. What does it mean for Bitcoin? Is it on? Is it off? What is happening? China has massive issues. What does that mean for the markets? We'll explore some L1s. We'll talk about stocks and everything else. And let's try to pick up some questions today from the audience. So please ask questions and we'll try to cover them. Should we start with the Bitcoin? What's your take? We talked about it last time here. I still feel that that's what played out, actually, that we got a first higher low in Bitcoin in half a year, which would be massive, that this could be the change of the trend of making lower lows and lower highs for half a year. And suddenly that actually changed. So what's your take if we just look at Bitcoin in isolation? Who wants to start?
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, it's we did have a positive ETF week last week, a very big surge towards the end of the week, which was nice. We also had massive buy from Sailor. We'll talk about in a little while too, and what that all means. And all in all, it's just still this sideways chop pattern. It seems like every week, every month, we go from one hangover to the next. This current hangover is fear about the Fed cut. Half the traditional world is like, oh my God, if the Fed cuts 50, it means things are really bad and the world's going to break. And then the other half is we're going to go to the moon. And this has been a stunning chart you're showing right here as well, because I track this almost every 4 hours or so. And last week, I think it was Thursday, it was at 16% chance of a 50 basis point, and it shot to 50% chance in just like 48 hours. And now it's, what is it, 59% or something?
Yeah.
So that's a big move. So that's it has a lot of people concerned. You know, when the markets and indicators like this move fast, it causes worry. And I think that's what we're seeing a little bit of in the market right now.
Yeah, we'll come back to what it actually means. Mando, what's your take on the charts and everything here?
I like Bitcoin. I've been saying for a while, like I've been moving assets into Bitcoin, both stables and the JLP position I've been in. I feel as though it's maybe a little bit too early to tell if that was actually a higher low, but it is looking like it. It seems to hit resistance around the I think it's the 21-day EMA at the moment, which is like forming the main barrier to resistance as it moves up. But I like it. I think you've got a couple more weeks here where there's a lot of volatility. This is. And what James has touched upon there is not normal. Normally, going into a Fed meeting, you've normally got a pretty good sense of what they're going to do each time. This is one of the first times in many, many months where you've had this sort of 50-50 split between what they're going to do. And that's generally not good for markets. You generally tend to see that markets like clarity. So I think whatever happens post this Fed, you're going to get a bit more clarity. Either they do 25 bips and they're very dovish, or they do 50 bips and you'll wait to see again, like, are they still dovish? Do they say, okay, we're going to wait and see what happens after this 50 bip cut? It's very, very clear that interest rates are way too high. So if they do 25 bips, I think they'll be extremely dovish at the press conference. You also have the Bank of England meeting this week. You have the Bank of Japan meeting this week. It is a big week for central banks, so you're going to have some volatility. But I think this is just a great time to move into Bitcoin during this time. Altcoins, I think it's a little bit more of a difficult story, but I think this is one of the final times you're going to have to pick up Bitcoin before what I would imagine is going to be a rally in October, particularly the second half of October.
Marty, what's your take on the drama?
I agree. I mean, last week we were $3,000 lower, so we've come up $3,000. I think we're at the last point of support in the LPS on the Wyckoff. If you're familiar with the Wyckoff, you get the spring, which we had recently, exactly 5th of August, the 4th and 5th of August. Then we had that retest of the spring, which was perfectly played out. Then we run up towards the LPS, which is 61,000. And we always do a hard rejection, which we just saw as hard as possible, just to shake out the last people. And I think it's played to perfection. Global liquidity is supporting the move up. It's 90.78 trillion all-time high. I think we're going to see a series of, moves up with sharp pullbacks until we reach the SOS, which is around, back to where we were before in the 70 region. I feel good. Obviously, I said the first half of September is going to be extremely bearish with a lot of fear on macro. Obviously, we had another Trump attempted assassination to throw into the mix. All these very bearish things from the debate, etc., political as well. But then I always said, starting towards the 19th and the 20th, I think we're going to get crypto bullish, starting with token 49, Solana breakpoint, and so on. And it's playing out to perfection. As far as I'm concerned, I'm very happy. I agree with Mando. I think this is your last chance to buy Bitcoin in the 5s. So there we have it.
Should we explore the yields a little bit? Because now we talked about it. So if we're looking at the yield chart as such, this is the 2-year yield. We talked about it last time that it looks like there was a complete breakdown here, and that did play out. It did go lower. You see here, this was even head and shoulders, and then it was a retest from below, and it went down. So this clearly looks like this is going lower, meaning that the yield cuts are coming faster than the market thought earlier. That's what we see in this chart going down. So what does it actually mean? What does it mean if yields are dropping? Because I think that's what a lot of people are thinking about right now. It seems clear that yield cuts are happening now. It's a question about how fast and how much. That's the only question. And then people are worried if it's too fast, but wasn't fast rate cut what we wanted. So let's explore this a little bit. And what could we expect in terms of implications on the speculative markets? Mando, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, sure. So yes, we've been waiting for years for rate cuts. They are now going to happen. I think what this will mean for the next 2 years, I would imagine, is that we probably go back again to a world where bad economic data causes us to sell off and good economic data causes us to rally. Because what will really be the question here is whether the Fed can still land a soft landing during this period. Whereas before, there's been periods where like softer economic data would be met with, right, we're going to have a lot more cowbell. We're going to have a lot more either easing or rate cuts are going to come. Now it's, can they, over the next coming months, still steer this soft landing? So I think there'll be a lot of more sensitivity around economic data, and it will react kind of how you would expect it to react over this sort of period. I think there'll be a lot of uncertainty going into each one of the Fed meetings than there has been in the past. We've gone through a period of kind of going sideways for a long period and no one really expecting much. And now we're probably going to be, right, is it going to be 25 bips, nothing, or 50 bips, kind of each one of these meetings? It's going to have a bit more volatility, I would say, to it. But generally, I would say that take a step back. This is generally a good period for markets. We are now going to go through a period where the US, although it's not going to go straight into quantitative easing, is going to be cutting rates most likely for the next couple of years, I would reckon. And China is going through its own issues and is pumping liquidity as fast as it can. And you have the ECB cutting rates and you have the Bank of England cutting rates. So all the major central banks, other than the Bank of Japan, which is kind of raising rates, but very, very carefully from 0%, you're in pretty accommodative monetary policy. Generally, you start to see a very good period here for most asset classes, particularly those which are exposed to inflation, which is why you're seeing gold hitting all new all-time highs each week. This would be traditionally a very good time to be thinking about Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin's gone through, as we've said the last few shows, it's gone through this period of we had a lot of technical selling, lots of different pockets of supply going from the last, basically liquidations from the last cycles. You've got this opportunity to buy an asset which is often tied to gold from a correlation standpoint, which has broken down over the last few months because of that selling. Still at 57K, I think it's one of the best trades here, if I'm honest.
James, what's your take on the yield cuts finally happening? I mean, you've been saying for a very long time that the yield cuts will come. They will come big and hard, and here they are now, it seems.
Well,
So
I didn't think they'd hold it so high for so long, to be honest, because all they're doing is just exploding the deficit. But I've got a couple of quick little charts to show you that show you the real problem behind the situation. If I can share my screen. One is the Fed or JP Morgan expect a 50 basis point cut, which is number one. Number two, this just came in. This is breaking news right now. This is Warren writing to Chair Powell saying, we write today to urge the Federal Reserve to cut the federal funds rates. And why do they care? Well, there's some problems. Nearly half of the US is in extreme difficulty right now making payments. As some parts of the country, basically the darker the red, the more trouble people are in just making payments for household expenses like groceries, etc. There was a funny meme flying around the internet yesterday. It's like, oh, I'm much stronger now. I can now carry $100 worth of groceries with one hand. But this is the real issue. Credit card debt is exploding as well. And that's much of that is financed at between 20 and 29% interest rates. So they're just, a death spiral, not just the country in a death spiral, but also individuals. And then the final thing, this is related to probably our China discussion later. This is from Trueflation. Literally, it's at 1%. This is concerning. A lot of people think, oh, low inflation is good. No. If we get to deflation and stagflation, that's the kiss of death for an economy. So that's just my quick take as to some of the stuff that I think the Fed must see, and this politicians urging the Fed to cut. And that's why I think there's an 80% chance of 50 basis point cut on Wednesday. And then we'll see what risk assets do.
Yeah, I think money will get cheaper, guys. So we've got a 36-hour monetary roller coaster, right? It starts with the FOMC meeting and it ends with the Japanese trade numbers coming out, and that's what caused the carry trade rollback unwind the last time. So, by Friday we're going to have a lot more answers. I think we just got to hold tight for Friday, and we'll have a lot more clarity over the next weekend. But I agree with you. Yes, that true inflation number is frightening. De-inflation is just not what we want right now. That's what happened. In the 70s and the 80s, right?
Can I check my simplistic understanding as an engineer here? So my thinking is that if rates go down, money becomes cheaper, exactly like Marty said here. And then it's less interesting to hold interest-bearing assets. It's more interesting to take that money, put it in something speculative where you might get some good returns. So that's why lower rates could mean more interest in speculative assets, more people buying them, and price goes up. On the other hand, then, if the reason for the rate slashing is that the whole economy has gone to, shite, honestly, then people get worried instead, and maybe we should sell the speculative assets because the economy has crashed. That's kind of the duality here. Is this correct, or who wants to take on this?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, we haven't really seen. Sorry, Mando, to interrupt. We haven't really seen new money in this run since 20,000, down at the bottom of Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's has been risen up, obviously, by ETF inflows, but this will be our first cheap money cycle, printing cycle. So I think we're setting up, like you said, new money will come in, and people will have the opportunity to finally enter retail, to enter crypto. And I think Bitcoin is at a perfect price to enter, given it's $20,000 off its top. Go ahead, Mando.
Yeah, no, I think that Trueflation figure is really interesting to pick up on. What I do think is with AI, although there's been a lot of questions about whether it is actually generating revenue for a lot of the different companies in the NASDAQ, for example, or whether it's just going to be just very, very few that actually benefit from it, let's say NVIDIA leading that. what it's very, very clear is it's very deflationary. Like, I can even see that in some of the businesses I'm involved in. Like, AI means that you can cut costs for various different things, and I think that will start to show up in the data. We've unlocked a piece of technology here that is a threat to jobs and is a big threat to inflation, or at least will take some time for people to move their style of jobs. So I think that's going to be a big thing for inflationary pressure. AI is going to cause a massive drag on it for a long time. I think that we are going to, this is slightly different than the 2020 time. 2020 happened, COVID. They dropped interest rates and they started printing money, right? They started printing money and they started buying assets. This is slightly different in that they're just going to cut interest rates, at least in the US, although China's printing a lot of money. And so what you tend to get there is a bit more slower feed through into the economy, just like in the same way that when they raised interest rates, it took some time to kind of cause prices to come down. Similarly, when you start cutting interest rates, it's not like it's the next day do you start to see inflation come back. It's more like an oil tanker style move. You generally, economists believe it's like more than 6 months, sometimes up to 18 months it can take for those sort of things to happen. So you're trying to see a slower move. For capital markets, yeah, you get these sort of Tina rallies. There is no alternative. If interest rates start to go back down to like 2%, 1%, maybe you don't want to have your money in like 2%, 1%, isn't life-changing money for a lot of people. They need to get, they start to move progressively into more risky assets, and you tend to see that money flow out of things like treasury bills, where it's been an obvious trade with people like, a lot of different billionaires have got their money parked up in treasuries at the moment, Warren Buffett included. Like, if that goes down to like 1%, 2%, yeah, he'll probably look at more risky things. And in that sort of pyramid of people looking at risky things generally can move into things like inflation, trade, like Bitcoin, very, very quickly.
Another point is that no one's talking about how any of this is going to help the job market. I mean, we're in the biggest layoff cycle in a long time. How is a rate cut going to influence the job market? Does it mean that people will be able to buy cheaper money to pay and bring people back to work? I haven't heard anything from Janet Yellen, anyone from the federal government talk about how they're going to increase the job market or improve the job market, which is the primary macro number that everything is driven off. That's my big concern. And like you said, robots and AI don't help. They're making it less efficient to hire humans and more efficient to look at newer technology. So that to me is the biggest problem, is what are people going to do? Are jobs never coming back? Are we going through some kind of an epoch change where people need to learn a new career? That to me is scary.
I think that's
my biggest fear. Yeah.
I think you're going to see structural unemployment here for a lot of different jobs. Like, we went through structural unemployment in the 80s, let's say, and 70s, and a lot of that was manufacturing, right? This is structural unemployment that's going to hit a lot of white collar jobs. People are going to have to reskill themselves for sure in this sort of world. You talk about a lot, CTO. Like, I do think, we just don't even realize the extent that this is going to have on society yet.
Yeah, I would like to see more federal programs like actually come out and say, we have identified this problem, at least recognize that this is happening. Put in more programs to re-educate people, and we just don't see that. I don't know whether it's a low priority.
And the striking thing is that, so where will the new jobs be? Well, they will be in this new technology somehow. Some people will be able to create enormous value, while many who have today very good and secure jobs won't have those jobs anymore because they will disappear. Just like you said, the manufacturing jobs in the Western world disappeared during maybe the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And it's going to be the same for a white-collar job. But new jobs will be created. But I think there's very few politicians who really have understood that. They should be embracing this new technology and thinking about how do we attract that brain trust to our country or our state or our city or something. But looking at the majority of politicians, they haven't understood that. They still feel it's very annoying and disrupting, and there's a bunch of nerds running around trying to do stuff which is should be stopped. And I think they will get it, but sadly it will take longer than would have been.
Maybe we'll go back to manufacturing, Maybe that's what would be there's been a bit of a trend of that in the US in particular, but it will be interesting to see what happens to the segments in the job market with this.
I mean,
So
that's
if
one
we
of
stay on the
Donald Trump's main talking points, right? Donald Trump is the only politician already talking about bringing manufacturing back to the US. That could be the solution. I don't know any other politician talking about solutions to employment.
Yeah,
Really interesting.
exactly. But then say a person who has like driving an expensive car today, living in an expensive house and so on. If that person is willing to go to a manufacturing job where he will need to then compete with very cost efficient manufacturing in countries like, say, Vietnam.
Yeah,
And
but Germany is a very manufacturing focused, and that's what fourth biggest economy in the world. Like you can have, very rich manufacturing companies. But yeah, I agree. Like you have to choose your niche that you're kind of competing against.
Absolutely. If we stay on the macro for one more second, so what is the reason that the gold chart is looking like this, given the current world economy? Because gold is some kind of the safest spin store of value, and it's the old asset. And the reason this is important is that I think Bitcoin has a lot of the same proposition. So if we can understand what's happening with gold, perhaps we get a precursor to Bitcoin. Who wants to start?
We know that central banks are buying gold like never before. I've seen the charts. I post them all the time. Central banks all over the world are buying gold, specifically the BRICS nations. Whether that's a strategy to make a gold-backed coin to compete with the dollar, I don't know. Obviously, that's quite a controversial topic, but they're definitely the current buyer. They're sapping it up. And then Bitcoin, obviously, we know, it's going through a correction. It's going through a correction. So much speculation. But I think ultimately gold did a similar pattern previously in end of 2023, and then went on its run, which it's still on. I think Bitcoin will always follows gold. I think we're literally following gold. So, yeah, go ahead.
There's actually a cool chart here that if I could pop it up real quick. This one, what's stunning about this, obviously this clear resistance we're at support now at the, 57.6, 57.5 level. That is proving to be pretty okay support. Resistance 63.8, all-time high 73,800. What is incredible, like Mando talked about the setup, and as you said, CTO, the properties are the same. Why is Bitcoin lagging? And the answer is probably because of the big 5Gs, all the big dumps. And it shows you what a small asset it is, because it is still very vulnerable to dumpage from big players. And that's why I think one of the reasons why Bitcoin is lagging gold. We know Bitcoin's going to make an all-time high. It will follow gold. The question is it going to be 12 weeks later or 16 weeks later or even a little bit longer? And then there was a lot of stuff last week about BlackRock and Coinbase and cahoots keeping a lid on the Bitcoin price a la FTX in 2021. That's probably worth digging into a little bit as well right now. But this is cool. We're going to an all-time high if gold is at an all-time high. That's the basic message here. The question is when.
Yeah, James, I mean, if you go look at a chart in 2023 on gold, just go to an 8-hour chart from literally the same time period, April almost to the end of September. It did the same lower high, higher low, eventual capitulation to 1800 and turned around. And then this year, literally since the beginning of the year, coming into December, it's just been making higher highs. I feel like gold is 1 year ahead of Bitcoin, and I believe next year will be Bitcoin's year to do a similar thing.
Yeah,
it's very uncanny how similar they are on an 8-hour or a daily chart. 1 year behind.
I think that's it. Like, I think the correlation, the thing that makes sense here is gold. The thing that doesn't is Bitcoin. Like that correlation, which has been very, very strong for a while, broke down a few months ago. And even though gold keep on hitting new all-time highs, Bitcoin hasn't. And if you've been following Bitcoin at all, you kind of know where that's come from. There's been a lot of sellers. Now, at the same time, I think there was something out this week that the Saudis bought like 108 tons of gold, like in the black market or something like that. They're buying from Swiss banks directly. Like money is going to go into these sort of inflation trades. I'm looking at these sort of trades. I'm looking at the inflation trades that were big in 2020. Like things like Rolexes are down a lot. A lot of luxury goods are down a lot because the Chinese buyer has been massively hurt over the last 4 years. A lot of these inflation trades are going to come back. If gold's hitting new all-time highs, And some of these other assets are still going through, let's say, the liquidations of either China or liquidations in crypto from previous cycles. These are good times to buy those assets because the underlying trend is going to be higher for a lot of these things.
Yeah, for
Absolutely
quite
agree.
many years, one of the best ways to get the precursor for Bitcoin's next move was either yield or looking at gold charts. And the past couple of months, that has not worked. And Bitcoin has, gone lower where a lot of indications would have, pointed otherwise. That's why I've been so eagerly looking for some signs of the turnaround. And let's see if this higher low holds this time.
And one final point, what happens when a medium-sized central bank starts stacking Bitcoin? Then you'll see a very special chart. So,
or if US gets in, if Trump gets in and gets a Bitcoin reserve going.
So with that transition, let's talk about the election odds and the implications of markets. We're not doing politics here on this show. We're just trying to understand what could possibly happen with the markets in different scenarios, and also trying to understand which scenario seems more likely. So looking at poly market, it seems very even, but then there are some other markets. Mando, you are on top of all these. You see some other markets where the odds are quite different.
Yeah, the only other one that people look at is Nate Silver's model, which who is actually, I think, now working with Polymarket as well as an advisor, but he has it 60% versus 40%. Kamal, I think if you look into his model predicts that Trump voters tend to massively underpoll and they show up on election day. So part of his judgment on that 60-40 is that it's not showing up in the polls. And there's evidence of that in the previous two elections. So Polymarket, to be honest, I think is better in terms of going with, but Nate Silver's generally right on these elections. So maybe it's somewhere in between, but it does feel like it's a dead heat at the moment. There hasn't really been much new news from either side. It didn't come up in the debate last week at all, which I don't think is great for crypto that it wasn't talked about at all. I think Trump, obviously had another assassination attempt yesterday, but he's meant to be, or his family is meant to be launching a crypto project this week, of which it's kind of been met with, I would just say, a little bit of confusion in the space. Like, not many people predicted him to do that before the election, but we'll see how that goes. So there's a little bit of, let's say, uncertainty there, but I would say not much new to update on this over the last week or so. I think we expected a lot from the debate and nothing really came of it.
Yeah, and CTO, I sent you two links, two quick polls, if you can share them real quick, which is the Nate Silver guy, who is the gold standard of analyzing, aggregating polls. Not that one.
Bring it up. See it actually. Did you send it in the chat?
The private, in the chat.
Okay,
it's a Twitter link.
One second. Okay.
Yeah, he's generally been like, he's predicted, I think he's predicted 50 of 50 states in many of the previous elections. So he's generally seen as like a good pollster, but he's had Trump ahead for a while now. He was at like 65% before the debate, and now it's moved to 60-40. I think people thought he might come down to like 50-50, but he's still got Trump pretty comfortably ahead.
It's in the StreamYard chat. Sorry, CTO.
Yeah, I saw it. So here we have it.
Yeah.
Drift, also Drift Markets on Solana now has also a prediction market. They've got it 48, similar, almost exactly to Polymarket. So that's a good correlation there. We've got a double confirmation.
We'll see.
One thing that happened, guys, I list Binance's holdings of Bitcoin, and they actually messaged me directly on the weekend. I was driving. I nearly fell out of I nearly crashed. Binance themselves messaged me, corrected the number slightly, and asked me to not associate them with China.
Wow.
So that was quite interesting. Yeah. So I immediately did. I made it global. Binance is global. There you go.
In fact, there's another slide. If I could share a CTO, this one, he's out on the 29th. Is that 13 days? He's back in the game, and we should see some BNB appreciation after that.
And we've got Caroline Ellison getting sentenced on the 24th. People don't talk about that. That could be interesting too, as well as Gary Gensler's testimony on the 23rd in the House. Lots of high profile things going on.
Yeah,
my personal opinion about the election is I think the election will just be used more as an event by market makers to manipulate, either up or I think it'll be a final, I call it the V-shaped recovery. I think they're going to use it to perfection leading up to the election. But I don't think, we still don't know anything about Kamala Harris's view on crypto. So it's all speculation at this point. She could be pro-crypto, we don't know. Which is very interesting.
Very interesting. So before we go into the L1s and stocks. So James, you mentioned China a couple of times and previously here. What do you make of that? What does it mean for the markets and what is happening really?
Before we jump into China, I do have a very quick slide that I dropped in. Let me see. This one. Just MicroStrategy, because it's on the agenda, but we didn't touch it. What's stunning about this particular position, they now own 245,000 Bitcoin, which is 1.17%. Sorry, 1.7% of all Bitcoin. If you assume there's only ever going to be 15 million Bitcoin, which is a big bag because a lot of Bitcoin is lost forever. I estimate at least 4 to 5 million Bitcoin is gone forever. So that position has become quite substantial. And this is a great chart from Nick from Econometrics, but it shows you the size of the recent buy, and they still have another billion to blow from their ATM to buy more Bitcoin. So they will definitely be somewhere around 255,000 Bitcoin within weeks, I reckon.
They're 14,000 behind Grayscale right now.
Yeah, Grayscale is bleeding out. Grayscale, I thought it was down to 220 from 620.
Grayscale, I just use Arcam. Arcam's got them at 258,509 last night.
And then
because I saw a good question somewhere in the chat. Whales buying is always portrayed as positive, but the higher the percentage of Bitcoin held by whales isn't increasing acceptance by the average Joe. Isn't this counterproductive? Was the question. Like if the Bitcoin are held by institutions and these big players, could it threaten Bitcoin in any way? What do you think?
Yeah, and we're seeing that actually with another type of chart here. A lot of strange stuff is happening to on-chain dynamics of Bitcoin. So here we have deposit addresses. They are the lowest level since 2016. So as the ETFs and as Sailor and as the big players suck up all the Bitcoin, the chain is actually used less, which the biggest concern for me is Bitcoin is a network. And the less the network is used, the less value it has. So unless it's just a hardcore store of value, and that's the only narrative. So this one for me is a little bit concerning. And if Metcalfe's law holds true, very concerning. So that's the other angle there. So I agree with that issue. It goes against the philosophy of what Bitcoin is, the kind of the people's money, the world money. But if it's all sucked up by big players and big corporations and big ETFs, then that defeats the purpose a little bit.
I think this number will continue to go down, because I think Bitcoin's dream of being a layer like an L1 for payments is well, not really dream, but its original purpose is not as strong as it once was. And secondly, the ETFs. The ETFs are now starting to buy a lot of this Bitcoin, and people are owning those ETFs rather than owning it outright. So I can imagine this can continue to go lower. I think that's a fair point. Like Metcalfe's law is, the value of the network is as much as people use it, right? And Bitcoin, there are some layer twos being built on Bitcoin where people are saying, this could be used for payments. We've seen that before with things like stacks. I think that there's still the jury's still out on a lot of that. I still think that at the moment, the strongest narrative for Bitcoin is that it's gold. The fact that whales are buying more, I would say isn't necessarily terrible for that gold sort of narrative, but it does hurt its ability to be seen as like a form of money going forward. But yeah, I do think this is very relevant. The idea that whales are buying more. I think we're in for a second half, which is relatively strong though. Just looking at those figures, like we've got another billion coming in from MicroStrategy. He'll continue to buy every few months, it feels like, and then I think we'll probably get another nation state maybe come in, like Qatar, given the regulation that we saw more recently, and maybe even one of the other Gulf nations come in to buy Bitcoin. You've seen that gold, right? Sorry, that oil is just getting absolutely hammered at the moment. All of these sort of countries that are relying on oil for their whole budgets are now looking. They need to desperately diversify, and I think Bitcoin will come as one of the more obvious things for them to reach for. So I do think you'll see a number of these different economies start to explore blockchain a little bit more for investment purposes. So I think you'll start to see that. And then you have FTX as well. Like that's another.
And that's a great point, Mando, because commodities are at a 25-year low against the S&P 500. Never happened before. We're talking copper, we're talking oil, we're talking, with the exception of gold, of course. So commodities are still very cheap compared to the stock market, which means there's still a lot of upside for certain commodities going forward. And then the big elephant in the room, of course, is liquidity, which is, you mentioned China real quick. There's one quick slide there. This is very concerning. But the good news about this news for China, they have had their 5th straight quarter, the longest stretch of declines in 26 years in China. But you know what Xi is going to do? He's going to fire up that money printer like there's no tomorrow, bail out the real estate industry, and attract more capital and development. Their plan is a long-term plan to take over the world, and they have a money printer, and they are going to use it hard to reverse this. They see this data like we do, like Bloomberg does, and that's going to be big. That's also going to help the global liquidity that Marty and Mando and I talk about all the time. So it's going to be good times ahead.
Yeah, I watched Bitcoin One. I think Bitcoin One pair is becoming more prevalent than the dollar pair. It's something to watch.
Yeah, I think they put a lot
of Bitcoin Gold.
I think one perspective. Sorry, go ahead, Manu.
I was just going to say, I think monetary policy is how they fix that. Like they have a lot of debt already, but deflation's coming down. I think they're just going to print. Like global money supply right now is just the PBOC. Like any change that we're going to see over the next couple of years, majorly there is going to come from China. And I think it's only going to go higher. I think they're only going to accelerate all the money printing there.
The only perspective I wanted to add on the previous point here with that big institutions are buying Bitcoin now is, what about the small guy? At least the small guy can buy it. It's easy to sit in the Western world and forget that most people of the world, they're literally locked out from most of the financial markets. They can't buy the things even if they want to. They don't have the accounts. And I don't know, do you still have this accredited investor concept in the US? Like if you're not rich enough, if your dad wasn't rich, you can't buy the best assets and things like that. So at least Bitcoin is possible to buy for everyone in the world.
Yeah, in fact, Grayscale still plays that game. They just launched, I think, an XRP trust and a SUI trust. So they give it to the rich people, and then they jack up the premium on the asset, and then they dump it on retail. The retail thinks, "Oh, I'm buying SUI through Grayscale, great," but no, they're actually getting shafted slowly. So I'm sure you've been watching that, Marty, too. I don't know how big the SUI bag is at Grayscale right now, but again, it's the criminal thing. If I was the SEC, I'd come down on hard on that game, letting the rich dump on retail. But I guess it's the way of the markets and has been for 150 years. It's just sad to me.
Yeah, need some education. Cannot come in with no knowledge in the markets and think that not going to get manipulated by the institutions, because as you point out, that has literally been the name of the game since the markets were created, to move the money from the many to the few. And
those Grayscale altcoin trusts. I mean, the Solana trust, where does it trade? Like it trades like 500% above where Solana trades. Like if you want to buy Solana, or you want to buy SUI, or you want to buy XRP, just buy it on an exchange. Like they generally trade at like some massive premium very, very early on. So be very wary doing that.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if we had any questions on this. Have to watch House of Cards to understand how White House power most. That is a TV series, though. We have to point that out. A few more questions on the previous topics before we move on. Ask Mando. German economy.
German economy is not doing well. I wouldn't say that's necessarily due to just the fact they do industrialization. Like they were massively reliant on cheap Russian energy for this to work. Now the US, very differently, is now I think the biggest energy producer in the world. Right? They are actually making more oil than the Saudis. The US has energy independence from the rest of the world. Like if US wanted to become a manufacturing giant again, it could. It very easily could. It has all the resources to be able to do it. It's less reliant on other nations to be able to get there as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned German deindustrialization. The backbone of the German economy is manufacturing, and the backbone of manufacturing is the automotive industry. And you have the big players like BMW and Volkswagen hitting the wall. Volkswagen, for the first time in its history, will close 2 factories. They are offering workers 450,000 euros to leave. Imagine that payout. And they will be booking about $4.5 billion from provisions for capacity cuts. So Volkswagen is a dead man walking, and they don't have the answer to what the world needs today, this new electrified world. So the German economy I'm deeply concerned about, which is going to also drag down the European economy. It's not pretty. And their move to transition with all the bureaucracy in Germany and Europe and the ECB, it's just a nightmare. They really need to. I think the guy Drago a week or two ago said, we need a massive stimulation to the tune of about 5% of GDP to reinvigorate and bring innovation to Europe. Did you guys see that one? Week or so?
Yeah, there's big questions about Germany right now. Like a lot of other nations, particularly like the southern nations that used to be the issues with the euro, like they're growing much faster than Germany right now. Germany has an issue in that it was an industrialized nation, often built around cars, which was dependent on Russian gas, and now a lot of that is changing. And they got rid of a lot of rid of all their nuclear plants. Like it's they're going to take some time, I think, to be able to fix it.
Absolutely, we had a big engagement actually on uranium 2 years ago because it was exactly that conclusion. Yeah.
I follow this energy dependence and independence chart since 1980. And it indexes out at 0, and then above 0 is dependence, and below 0 is independence. And the US was actually following Europe until 2010. And it's something just before 2010, I believe 2008, it started heading to 0. It has passed 0. It's now heading into net exporter territory. China is way up there with Europe on net importer in a terrible situation along with Europe. But the winner is Russia. Russia is sitting right at the bottom of the chart. It is extremely energy independent. It is a giant exporter. And that's something also we don't talk about a lot. Russia's energy independence is really amazing. I can put that chart in the group just so you guys have it.
They got a lot of control over energy, especially since, like Mando said, also a lot of countries shut down their nuclear programs and then suddenly got very reliant on Russian gas in Europe, which I think was
in the WhatsApp.
We are kind of backpedaling on that, and that was the key conclusion why we thought uranium price would go up a couple of years ago, which it did, because not Germany though, but many other countries have kind of changed their policy to kind of regain energy independence. So very good point.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Say again, Marty.
I put the chart in the WhatsApp. If you want to show it on the screen, it's really interesting. Whatever happened in 2008, it's just unbelievable what happened there to cause that crossover of the US to become a net exporter of energy.
Okay, 1 second.
They found shale gas, I think, around that sort of time. That's when the shale thing happened. So
Something,
US
right? It's really
the most
interesting correlation.
insane amounts of energy right now. Like it has more, like I said, it has incredible solar facilities. It has incredible oil and gas repositories. It's depending on whether it uses them. There's been a lot of questions about like the state to which they're going to use them.
So there you can see
well.
the chart on the screen. I mean, just look at that. In 2008, something happened, just critical, just absolutely set US on a net exporter mission towards Russia. But you can see Europe is just heading into, over the 1,000 there. It's not looking good at all. So it's clear either the US or Russia will have to provide Europe and China with energy going into the next century.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Am I still here? I think maybe my battery ran out. Can you still hear me, guys?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can't see you.
That's great. Then let's talk about something else while I changed the battery. I forgot to do that, actually. I had like a slight hiccup. I couldn't find the keyboard to my computer just before the show. It's in some book
I'll
somewhere.
take it. We can talk about the L1s just while you're fixing yourself. But yeah, L1s I think is the next real question here, right? Like Bitcoin, we have the inflows coming in. L1s, SUI, Solana, ETH. Let's go through each one maybe. So ETH again, getting absolutely slaughtered. It feels like this week. You saw ETH dominance fall below 14%. ETH Bitcoin chart, I think dropped to a 3.5-year low. We don't want to like flog a dead horse, but this thing keeps on coming back. We keep on saying the same thing each week. It still feels like that one maybe has room to go lower, although maybe you have like a short-term bounce just because it's looking so horrific at the moment.
Yeah, it's got to stop soon. Like there's got to be a bottom somewhere. But that's a classic catching a falling knife thing.
I think we said it last week actually, that when it felt like it couldn't possibly look any worse, it did. It formed this descending triangle, and which broke down predictably. So it is price levels. ETH BTC is at price levels that it hasn't been at for, what is it, 3 years, something like that.
2020, yeah. I mean, another big thing that happened was Binance Coin BNB broke 4% dominance, which is huge. And I've started to track SUI
exactly
dominance,
because if you look,
now 0.15. Great.
Yeah, it's such it's such a contrast between the top three lay ones by market cap. I mean, this chart looks good. I don't know if it's because CZ is getting out or some other reason, but I mean, when Ethereum flipping support into resistance, this one flipped a resistance into support and continuing up. And Sol BTC is holding its key support at 0.002. It's holding its support on the USD chart. And then Ethereum, on the other hand,
looks
absolutely
I mean, the big question is,
like,
where is
such
the
a contrast?
where is
You kind of see them next to each other. Sorry.
The question is, where is the Ethereum dominance going? It's now at 13.93. It hit a low of 13.75 over the weekend, which is interesting. Benjamin Cowan predicted 13.6 a year ago. So he hats off to Benjamin Cowan on predicting that. But it looks from Wormhole Analytics that obviously there was a big Ethereum to SUI move for that trade. And it looks like it's starting to come back, but definitely still Ethereum going to Solana and back to Bitcoin. So it's quite interesting to see where Ethereum is going. But SUI's definitely come into the picture and shaking it up a little at 0.15 dominance. Might seem insignificant to many, but 0.15 dominance is quite a large increase from where it was at 0.05 coming into August. So SUI is definitely marching up. Potentially Ethereum people have decided to move into SUI to try and make up for some of their losses.
Yeah, I think we showed this chart last week. It was a really good looking chart and it has indeed moved up higher. So Marty, thanks for bringing that to attention. And yeah, this looks great. Someone is buying when the chart looks like this. That's for sure. Do you know what's driving this market?
Announcement of USDC coming probably this week or next. which is a massive move. I always say if Circle issues stablecoin on your network, that's a sign that you're probably going to succeed in the long term. They do a lot of due diligence, obviously. But I think everyone's aware that going into Solana breakpoint, we're going to see something special from Solana. And I think this is just kind of, the before thing. I think Solana is going to make a major move. They're setting it up. You can feel it. But Sui and Solana, guys, I just think you can't go wrong with allocations to Solana and Sui on the execution layer, and slowly move out of Ethereum until it bottoms, and then maybe consider longing it again. Where, I don't know, Benjamin Cowan's talking about 1,800 now. I've always said around 2,000 I thought was the threshold. But this BNB dominance thing is really interesting, come out of nowhere. We've always known that Binance always thought itself as an Ethereum competitor, and here they go. They're pushing up. Is this Binance moving Ethereum into BNB? We don't really know, but that is another possible scenario. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's become a lot more interesting, I would say, the L1. Like, in terms of the chasing pack, I think a lot of different trades are now, people are questioning whether to go into them. We spoke a few weeks ago about Tron, whether that could be a little bit of a trade. We've spoken about Sui a few times over the last few months as a potential trade. Solana is still kind of hanging out where it has been for the last few months. You've got Breakpoint, you've got a lot of announcements coming there. It's more difficult to me. Solana's obviously been the beast this cycle. It's done the best, probably maybe alongside like BNB. But it does feel as though there's a lot more like competing claims at this stage of the cycle. Just because I think actually it feels as though, other than payments, a lot of the like left curve activity has gone down, and I think a lot more people are like trying to vie for their coin to be the next cycle's coin, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of. I'm just looking at some math, DEX volume and fee data across all the L1s. ETH is still doing about 600 million a day of DEX volume, and Solana's at 500 million, but Binance is only 46 million at DEX volume.
Right, it's extremely strange. It feels manipulated. It feels like Binance is trying to appreciate their token.
Sui is doing about 40 million. So Sui and Binance are doing the same DEX volume.
And guys, once again, let's be very clear. We have not had new liquidity in a year, literally. So this is all shuffling money within crypto, just shuffling around, right? What happens when new money comes? Where is it going to be allocated to? I think that's going to be the next big question for our show going through the next new couple of weeks, is where's the new money going? I think it's going to be very interesting. As a new crypto buyer, I mean, how would you feel, given what you know now, if you removed all your knowledge and you just came into crypto right now, let's say between now and the end of the year, typically December is, the peak buying season. What would you buy? How would you allocate? And will it look a lot different to last year? I think that's an interesting topic we could start to talk about in the next few weeks.
I mean, for me, looking at this, go ahead, Mando.
I was just going to say, from my perspective, I've actually put it more into Bitcoin. I found the L1 trade has become more, it was so obviously Solana for the last year, in my opinion. And I just felt because activity in general in crypto appears to be slower now, I found that like it's been more competitive, that trade. And I don't know when we come out of that, but I am really still bullish the inflation trade that we spoke about at the start of the show. So it's more to me that I felt the more obvious trade has been Bitcoin, which is why I've been putting more money into Bitcoin for the last few weeks, as I've said, really. But yeah, I don't know with those L1s. Like, I feel like Solana is on a different league to the others in terms of adoption. But I don't know if we're going to see tons of people come into crypto from now until year end. I'm not sure about that. I think maybe if Bitcoin goes through a new all-time high, we'll start to see some of that left curve, like more people coming in and doing things. But I think we could be waiting a little bit more time. A lot of people got burnt already this cycle. Like they've been burnt on altcoins, they've been burnt on meme coins. A lot of the left curve trades just haven't really worked out, and it takes a little bit of time for people to get back into the water once they've been burned like that. So I've just felt as though the cleanest trade for me has been Bitcoin, even though I I think Solana's dominating and still will probably be ahead in the adoption cycle for a while.
And a counterpoint to you regarding adoption, if you look at the two big use cases, DEX volume, DEX users is going to the moon. Stablecoin volume, stablecoin usage going to the moon. They've just exploded this year, especially over the last 3 to 4 months. And you got places like Singapore where quarter over quarter stablecoin volume is doubling. So there's still a massive amount of pent-up demand, and people are sniffing out crypto solutions to save money, whether it's a coupon or transferring dollars or whatever else. I still think we're very early, but the adoption's definitely there. And when you look at these adoption curves during a sleepy month like August, have been quite stunning. So I think it could be a very good Q4.
What I like about the payment stuff is it is the backbone of this industry. Like that is what you, and maybe just to delve into this a little bit, like when payments is what we're going to have as driving the gas fees, driving the fees that go back to Solana. What you need for these sort of L1s to go parabolic is for the coin itself to be a form of payment itself. Like you are buying things in Solana, you're buying things in ETH. And what I felt as though for a lot of this cycle, people were buying meme coins in Solana. They were actually using it as a currency. Just like last cycle, ETH was a form. People would buy NFTs. They would buy things in ETH. And what I've seen over the last couple of months is people buying things less in the actual currency itself. And that this means we return to like the base level of things like, you know, stablecoin. I'm so bullish on stablecoins. I'm so bullish on crypto being a payments rail, but I've just found it a bit more difficult to pick the L1 when less of that left curve stuff is happening.
Yeah, I think the big tipping point will be some kind of regulatory clarity on stable coins, whether they be some kind of outsourced CBDC or whether they stand alone as legal tender. And then it'll be ADP. People will get the option of getting paid in stablecoin. I think when people get paid in stablecoin, then they spend in stablecoin. To me, that's the big tipping point of crypto adoption, and that's what we're working towards. And it starts with obviously is Washington DC regulation, and we all know what's going on there. So I think we're leading up to that personally, but I agree with you, Mando, 100%. When people start using the coin as a currency on its own, that's a big key indicator, and we saw that starting, but it kind of abruptly ended. And I think stablecoin will be the next killer use case. Getting paid in stablecoin, having stablecoin bank accounts, I think that's the big tipping point driving volume and gas, which will be true economic value, drive the layer ones up. I think that's right.
I think, Mando, what you just said will be one big takeaway for me from today's show, because we have seen that several times during the cycle, during the ICO boom, 2017, 2018, when ETH became money, then ETH became money again when it was NFTs, then ETH, and then BNB became money when people were buying altcoins, other altcoins. Solana became money when people are buying meme coins and so on. And if the speculative coin is the money, a lot of people will come to the same conclusion. Why am I not buying a bunch? I should buy a bunch of it now because it goes up in value later. Then I make money. Why am I keeping the money in stablecoin? That seems dumb. I should buy the ETH or the BNB or the SOL or whichever the coin is that's becoming money. And I think one of the best advice I've gotten throughout all these years in this industry is to try to figure out what the people are doing and why they are doing it. So if you can understand that, and if it happens again, if it happens with another chain, I don't know, Sui or some other, or becomes another wave in Solana, that is a really great key that I want to follow for myself. If looking at which coin to put the money in here that you asked, worth noting is that Bitcoin dominance has broken out. It's making a new high here in this cycle. Of course, connected to the poor performance of ETH BTC, because Ethereum is a big part of the denominator here. But that is worth noting. So just like Mando said, the easy thing here, if everything else holds stable, well, it's BTC that's going up in terms of percentage of market still. And that hasn't changed. Perhaps we thought it would change several times, but it hasn't. It's still going up. So I think that I agree. That's the easy trade.
As far as new narratives to invest into, I think the big new narrative coming into this conference season will be Bitcoin liquidity on fast, efficient Gen 3 layer ones. And we saw Coinbase launch CBBTC in record time, right? To put Bitcoin liquidity onto Base. And you saw a lot of controversial Twitter comments and threads around that. But I think that's the new narrative. And anybody that successfully can allow native Bitcoin to be, pegged to a layer 1 token and then participate in DeFi, I think is going to be the next narrative going into the new year. And obviously, Stacks has always been sort of a market leader. I think the Nakamoto upgrade was not a success right now. I'm still waiting on confirmation, but when that goes live, potentially that's an option. Zeus out of Singapore, which is backed by Anatoly and Manib from Stacks. They're trying to create a permissionless bridge for not only Bitcoin, also Dogecoin, Bitcoin Cash, and also Ethereum. And these are things that are going to jack these TVLs up and make Bitcoin usable. And I think these are the narratives we need to watch out for, as opposed to the CBBTC and WBTC narratives, which are these permissioned, multi-sig backed, trust me, bro, wrapped Bitcoins. So that's another narrative for people to look into, is Bitcoin on Solana, Bitcoin on Sui, and Bitcoin on Base. These are three things that are happening.
Very interesting chart. It is the correct one, right? The Zeus network, this one. It is just on the verge of breakout here. So if anyone
41 million market cap, guys. 41 million market cap right now.
But will it work? That's my question. I've been trying to get an answer for this for like 9 months. Are they going to be able to make it fly? That's the question.
The problem is once you hear it works, it'll be too late for the trade.
Yeah.
So this is a great early opportunity, I think, to long, potentially low leverage long, or potentially buy a small bag. Go ahead.
I will monitor this one for breakout. I don't hold any today, but if this one breaks out here, I think that could be an interesting risk reward, personally. Okay. What else? We have covered stocks. Do we have energy to talk about stocks as well? Is there anything particular to point out?
I think the interest rate sensitive ones like Enphase, I think, will rally into the end of the year. That's ENPH is the ticker. It's been kind of stagnant for a long time, but that is one of the most interest rate sensitive stocks because when people buy solar for their home, they have to borrow money. When the rates come down hard, it makes the solar option much cheaper. And this is in contrast to electricity rates going through the moon all over the place. Like in many cases, 50% plus inflation on electricity over the past 3 to 4 years. Some places even more extreme. So solar, I think, would be an interesting one to play. Obviously, the automotive sector itself, Tesla, you drop rates, things are cheaper, results will get better, more metal will be shifted. Things like that, I think, are super interesting.
Well, we've got that massive quadruple witching day, right, on the 20th, James. Can you explain to people what that is?
Yeah, that's when a whole bunch of different options terms expire at the same time. And it leads to huge volatility for the max pain to be achieved by market makers.
So everyone should be aware the 20th could be extremely volatile on the US stock market.
And I mean, the S&P, the stock market is at a very interesting point. It's kind of, we got a bullish engulfing candle almost here last week, and price is hovering just below breakout resistance for all-time high. Yeah. So if it can be pushed over a little bit here, everyone will see, actually the stocks are continuing, which could be very interesting. If looking at some of the stocks I know a lot of people are interested in, say NVDA, it is kind of painting this triangle, symmetrical triangle, which can break down or break up. But if it breaks up, everyone will be okay. Oh, wow, it's continuing. And that could be very interesting. I think Tesla is at a very interesting point as well. It has been in this triangle. But if it breaks out, which it is very close to doing here. That would also be a very interesting point in the Tesla price action, I think. So, and I agree with what you just said here, James, also from a technical analysis perspective. I wasn't following Enphase Energy, so thanks for that tip. It's been in a very clear and tight range here. Multiple touches on support. A breakout here would be definitely actionable from a technical analysis perspective. Very contained, limited downside, and looking at the past, definitely there's upside here. If it just looking at the chart, I don't know enough about the company. Great.
I mean,
great.
As a Tesla trader, James, I've been paying very attention. I'm obviously looking to add to my Tesla bag all the time. I just see this incredible wedge that's been going on now since 2022. Everyone knows about it. It broke through the wedge just briefly to 261 the other day, got rejected hard. But I think it's coming up for its second test, guys. I think if Tesla breaks this, we're going to see the 300 level again. So I'm on the edge. I could pull the trigger this week after all of this nonsense ends and into Tesla again.
It's eight massive businesses with huge market potential and profitability potential. 2025 will be nuts. Yes, it's been a tough 3 years, but it's also been an amazing 3 years for people to stack at like $106 and $141 and $160. And that's kind of the name of the game. You buy all these crazy opportunities and then you sit and wait a year. So a big part of my plan is to rotate out of crypto into this, but I've been kind of doing it all year anyway. Pretty much all I've been buying this year and last year has been heavily Tesla, some MicroStrategy, some miners, etc. So we'll see. It's one of those things where, when CTO talks about risk reward, very little downside, huge amount of upside. And it's the most compelling stock I've ever come across in my entire life. 35 years of looking at stocks. So that's Tesla.
And I mean, Tesla has this huge overlap now politically with Elon Musk and his political aspirations.
That's the problem.
I mean,
that's holding it back.
I'm almost feeling like a vote for Trump is a proxy vote for Elon Musk at this point. So, you could see it as actually a positive for Trump, the Elon Musk thing, but obviously the Tesla shareholders always see it as a negative, like a distraction. So I think it's a really interesting junction as well. It might be very beneficial to Tesla if Trump wins, because Musk is going to be, a decision maker, a stakeholder in industrial decisions of the country. And, it might elevate his gigafactories and his production and his energy to the moon. I mean, so I think it's really interesting. As a speculator, leading into the selection, I think a Tesla trade right now is an incredibly interesting trade. That's why I'm looking at it. I think if Trump wins, I think Tesla makes quite a large move. But if Trump doesn't lose, I don't think Tesla goes down at all.
There's another reason why, I always talk about the most hated assets and the most hated people. Can you pop that slide up, CTO, real quick? This is another thing which is causing a lot of contempt on the planet. Now, I think, 140 countries use X as their source of news. Does anybody, what is your top source of news here, guys?
X.
Yeah, I mean,
Wall Street Journal, ABC, TV.
It is probably X. Yeah, I do a daily newsletter, and I would say, half of it comes from X for sure.
And then adoption is up 22% year over year since he took over. But 140 countries, that is the global town hall, which is always the vision. And people aren't buying newspapers and people aren't watching TV anymore. And this also makes him very unpopular. Thoughts, CTO?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I haven't watched mainstream media. I don't even have a regular TV connection for the past, 10 years or something like that. Why would you go there for news when you can actually read it from the person saying it themselves? Someone has an X account and they are tweeting it.
And the ABC presidential debate, by the way, was rigged as well. It was completely rigged against one candidate. So, they can't even run a proper debate, and all that came to light yesterday.
Let me counter my own point here, actually. If I'm looking at myself, I'm not watching the mainstream news for a long time. checking X. But I'm also relying a lot on messaging, WhatsApp. If something big happens, my friends on WhatsApp or Discord or something we're gonna talk about it. So of course the risk here for myself is that I'm creating a massive echo chamber for myself. Perhaps I don't hear the other perspective anymore, because on X you also you interact, follow people who mostly agree with you. That's how the algorithms work. So I think that could be, it's probably not only me. I think a lot of people are more in this mode of living, that we're kind of interacting with people with more similar views as ourselves. Do you guys think that's
100%?
That's a trend?
Yeah, I think X is great for an information source, and even I said, like, I think 50% of the links that I put to are from X, but it's also an incredible place for misinformation and wild conspiracy theories, and you can really get down into just hearing an echo chamber of, I don't know. I think sometimes it can be bad for people to kind of go down some of these routes. I think there's such massive distrust of mainstream media that we've also veered to the other side, that people look at stuff in such low resolution, I think, at the moment as well. Like they want to oversimplify the world. And so they often are drawn towards things like conspiracy theories at the moment, because they're so far rejecting mainstream media. So I don't know. The other half of that, I do have, like, I use a site called Feedly, which actually has like an RSS feed of tons and tons of different websites. So I use that as well. But yeah, I think you've got to appreciate that X is great, but it also, there's two halves to that. Like popular takes on stories aren't necessarily the right ones.
And by the way, I just have a piece of breaking news, everybody. So to prove we're not ETH slammers here, we look at all assets objectively. Ethereum just bounced clean off the 200-week moving average, and it very rarely penetrates this level. So that's a bullish sign for ETH bottoming. You want to pull up 200-week?
One interesting point, Mando, on your topic is I recently switched from a free space community to a subscriber only. It's only $3 a month, so 10 cents a day. But the difference has been astounding. There's less conspiratorial discussion. There's less hate. There's less bots. It's real people. So what I think, there's a lot of bot action on the general X feed, creating those sort of, dangerous funnels of conspiracy. I think Elon Musk is on a strategy, and when you just give a micropayment or force people to go through a payment channel to give a level 1 KYC, you lose a lot of that conspiratorial stuff. The tin hats disappear, the crazy people go away. It's quite amazing. I'm astounded. I highly recommend everyone to do it. There's a new feature on X, subscriber only spaces. It's excellent.
Just showing. I'm not sure if this was the one you wanted to show.
The 200 week. Sorry, just choked my coffee.
So this
never thought that was possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I don't think we should rule out any project. At least that's what my take on this. If things turn around, I'll be the biggest ETH bull again. I just don't see it in the chart yet. But coming back to this point about echo chambers and so on, because I think it's an important point for everyone here. And one method that I try to use myself, because there was a lot of emotions over the weeks here. Someone here, said something, and a lot of people in one community got very upset during this week. And I feel that we've gotten, as a society, we've gotten less tolerant, and probably, maybe myself too. But at least I try to practice. I try to listen to people with diverging opinions. I think that's the strategy. That's a winning strategy, is diversity. Diversity has gotten a soiled word. Now diversity kind of means people who look different. I couldn't care less about how people look, how tall they are, if they are, black or white or brown, whatever color, doesn't matter. But what is key for high-performing teams is diversity in terms of skill set, in terms of perspective, in terms of background, in terms of knowledge, in terms of the way they look at things. That is a winning formula for, say, winning teams or high-performing teams in the corporate domain. And I think it's the same when we're trying to understand the world, like we're sitting here. We're trying to understand what's happening with the markets. Why is something going up? Why is it going down? We're trying to understand everything from technical details in the protocol up to who is winning the election and what does it mean to how is China doing. You know, it's a world of space and topics, and no one person will be able to understand that from all perspectives. And I try to listen to different opinions from different people all over the world, and then I won't agree with most of the things. In fact, I disagree with most people about most things most of the time. But sometimes there's something that you haven't thought about, and I feel that is incredibly helpful for myself. And that's one thought that I want to offer everyone listening here, that, you know, let's not fall into the echo chamber trap. Let's try to seek out diversity of backgrounds and opinions. And I feel that makes me a better analyst, if nothing else. All right.
Yeah,
I agree with that completely.
I mean, I always say to people, what is your intention when you write a post on X, when you comment? What is your intention? I think people have drifted off from thinking through their intention. If you're trying to change somebody's mind, the last thing you want to do is be aggressive, insult them, or push them away. You're not going to change their mind. If you want to change someone's mind, you need facts to support your theories. You need to be soft and gentle and educate. And you need to make it welcoming so that they want to learn more. And I think that's where we need to get to. Right now, it's just so much hostility and you know, name calling. You're not changing people's minds, so you're not reaching your objective. I think that's a problem. So that's what I think.
It's very practical. It has very practical implications when coming to something as investing. If you get married to a coin and then you ride it 99% down, it's not good for the trading balance. It's bad, right? You have to kind of try to separate these things. And if situation change, you have to try to change your mind, which is quite difficult. But one way to do it is to at least interact and listen to people with opposing opinions and see if they have a point, because perhaps they do. Perhaps you realize, oh, actually they have a point. I hadn't thought of that. And that changes your mind. And that's maybe what saves your balance in them.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Great
Thank you,
show, guys.
everybody. Long one.
Anything else? Any final words? We're over time.
No, we're bullish.
Next week's show is going to be remarkable because we're going to go through a whirlwind for a week. Let's see where we land up. Let's see next Monday. I think it's going to be really interesting.
I think 50 basis points will help risk assets. So there'll be volatility. There'll be a little bit of initial fear. The way it works every time they do something with this, the first 24 hours, the market either falls or is fearful, and then it rebounds fast. So that's my forecast.
I mean, we'll be in the middle of Breakpoint on the 21st during the show. That'll be interesting. We'll know new Solana features, products. We'll be through the Japanese decision. We'll see if the carry trade unwinds again on the weekend. I mean, literally, we're going to know a lot of answers this time next week, guys. So tune in. It's going to be a big show.
So let me give one example. I take one more minute from everyone because I'll show an example of what I just said, which is very practical. So here's a comment. CTO Larsson, doesn't Zeus have horrendous tokenomics? So what we just happened here is that Marty showed an interesting fundamental analysis that, you know, Zeus could do something very interesting. I showed that the chart is at the point of breakout. It hasn't broken out yet, but if it does, I said it could be interesting risk reward. And this person, Zav, and probably James, will say, but the tokenomics, what about the tokenomics? Have you thought about that? Maybe they are really bad. So these are the perspectives. And then as a viewer, you can go here and, you know, look at these different perspectives and perhaps come out with a better analysis.
But there's a key point. There's a key point as well. So when you have an asset that's so small like Zeus at $40 million, tokenomics have less of an impact. So, but if you have a bigger asset, like $1 billion asset, tokenomics are much more important. So everybody needs to put that in perspective as well. And that's
critical. I mean, reading tokenomics is, you need to also, I mean, go to the Zeus Network XYZ tokenomics. It's a typical TG, token generation event. So they've released 5% of the Jupiter Launchpad, 5% of advisors, 10% to the team, 5%. You know, they've just released 5% of the tokens, and typically everyone sells. And that's what you saw on Sui. That's what you saw on Jupiter. That's what you see on all these TGs. And that's what's supposed to happen, right? That's supposed to happen, and that's happened. Then they'll release another 10%, and we'll watch. But that's the way it works. This is the modern way of releasing a project. It's called a fair launch. TGE, learn about it, and you'll be less afraid.
All right.
It's
gotten dark. It's gotten dark outside.
It's gotten dark behind me. I think it's a sign. Let's call it a day, guys. And thanks for today.
Yeah, terrific show, guys. I mean, next week we'll see you all here. Everyone, all the people tuned in. Make sure next week's a big show. We'll have a nice synopsis of everything we spoke about and a lot of answers for the next few months. So let's see what happens.
Fantastic.
Thanks, everybody. Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Thank you, Mando. Thank you, Marty.
Yeah, man. Thanks, guys. Great show as usual.